Hi, Leah.
Hi, Judy.
We are back for our Anatomy of Ancestral Alchemy podcast.
Hmm.
And today we are recording around what came up for me after we recorded, kind of processing and digesting the interview that happened between 45 Vance and Zielinski. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
If you can like and subscribe, it would help us tremendously get our podcast out there. I've been getting so much feedback around people are really appreciating content because they haven't heard about this before.
Yeah,
And I'm just thrilled because you and I talk about this all the time. So it's
Yeah.
fun to have folks who are appreciating this. So thank you for joining us again.
absolutely.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the process of when something comes up for us around like politics or things that are happening, what to actually do with it. And so this is me explaining a little bit of how I help my clients alchemize what's coming up, using that conversation that we had last week as a way in. Okay. And so stop me if there's anything that is unclear.
I will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So for me, when I come across something that brings me a lot of charge, like when you were talking about 45 saying it's really hard to have a conversation with you when you're like that, right? I had this huge rage that came in. And so what to do with that? Okay, so I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to explain what I did so that it's a way in for you to do that exploration. And then what you can do is in the comments or you can email us, let us know how it goes, and then that'll guide us on our future podcasts. Okay. So Leah, when you said that, I immediately went back to college. Just to summarize, it was like Trump had said this, and I was like, oh, for me, it's when I feel like incompetent or I don't understand what the rules of engagement are or
Yeah.
etiquette. And it turned into a class issue for me. And so what happened was I just allowed myself to float back and go, where is this data coming from? And it was when I was in undergrad. And so for me, just pause. Whenever I share a story, it's not necessarily for entertainment. It's to help you, viewers, have an example of, oh, this is how I can do it. Anytime I share my personal information, it's not for you to figure me out. It's an invitation to figure you out. So back in Colorado, I had earned this very prestigious scholarship. Most of the other folks who got these scholarships were very well resourced. What I understand now is needed to be well resourced because you had to be the top performer, you had to prove your extracurricular activities, all of these things that require access to resource and time.
Yeah.
Which is usually folks who have access to financial security and parents who have enough time to kind of sculpt things out for them. The main reason why I got that scholarship, I did fine academically and extracurriculars, but the main reason I got it was because of affirmative action. Okay. I was clearly an affirmative action hire. And going into the groups, because in getting this, and I chose to go to CU Boulder, they also had a leadership group. And my peers would always talk about, oh, yeah, affirmative action. Like you didn't earn your place here, kind of thing.
Ooh.
I know. So that's what came up for me when you shared what Trump had shared, because it was something I had to deal with every single moment when I would go into those leadership spaces of this kind of looking up and down, right? The assessment of what are you wearing, like the feedback that he got around not wearing a suit, and what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I don't know, how's that landing so far for you, Leah?
Makes complete sense.
Yeah. And so now going back in, right, with the intensity that I had points further back even. So I was able to land on this memory of when I was an undergrad and I clearly felt incompetent because all these people knew how to do all these different sports and they looked comfortable in their skin when they were out with friends. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing because all I did was work when I was little.
Yeah.
But the intensity points back even further. And then I floated back, oh, my parents, my mom and dad, were illiterate. Due to the circumstances of what happened in China, they had to stop going to school at like 5th grade.
Wow.
So this sense of incompetence was in their own lived experience, which then informs epigenetically my lived experience. So epigenetics is the genetic expression based on environment or trauma. But the charge was even more intense, right? Like I wanted, and I had said, the reason why I can't watch this is because I would destroy my TV.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
level of violence. And so I kept floating back because the charge didn't land fully. And so now I was able to land it with my grandmother. Okay. She had partially bound feet. She came from landowners, and she had chosen, because she didn't like the way that the teacher had taught her, her mom was able to let her not to go to school. What happened was, because they were landowners during the Cultural Revolution, so anyone who had means, so landowners were wealthier, got switched to the bottom. And then peasant class were then put at the top. So again, it's just the flipping of the oppression, right? Who gets access now? The story I make up is it was intentional that they had uneducated folks at the top because then it was easier to control them. What happened was, during the communist takeover, what they would do is they would send the wealthy or the educated on the road, and they'd wear a dunce hat. So one of the stories I heard, and it might not be exactly right because my family doesn't like to talk about all the details, so I infer it, is my grandmother had to walk with a dunce hat on, and people would throw food at her or spit at her or call her names.
Wow.
Right. And so now when I land it in the appropriate space, what happens in my nervous system is that charge goes like this. Because now there's resonance. There's, oh, that's exactly where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, this process we're teaching you now is how you're going to do your alchemy work, is you identify where in your ancestry it is, and you keep floating back until you feel in your nervous system this settling. And so now I'm just waiting for it to like plateau. And for me, it's in my solar plexus. So it's this chakra here under the heart. And solar plexus, for folks who don't know, represents power. And so that was the other thing I wanted to mention is like, Leah, I love talking with you because you bring in your own stuff and I bring a little bit, and we add in stuff together. When I talk about the chakra, like we have this common language of, oh, the heart's about connection and love, or, oh, solar plexus is about power. Oh, so the body's always providing data and context. And so one of the hopes around this podcast is that we can teach you how to listen to the body and discern like any meanings.
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't know. I wanted to see if you have anything to add.
I love that. And I love your description of, first of all, let me just start with this, hearing more of like your family story. It's interesting how there's deep compassion in hearing your story and your grandmother's story, and then thinking about actually how a part of what you shared connected to something that I feel like I've experienced. So like that, again, that mirroring that can happen in the shared learning space. And I also really feel this piece around the nervous system settling when you land on what feels like the right spot, and also the continued unfolding that can happen. So I was sitting with a client yesterday and we were doing some of this work, and as we were peeling back layers, their nervous system kept settling, right? As they kept naming the things, their nervous system kept settling. So just following that cue of you're getting closer, you're getting warmer, right? So that game, getting warmer, getting cooler. And yeah, so I think acknowledging too that there can be layers to it that keep leading to the core resonance as you were describing.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about what resonated for you in your story as
Yeah.
you heard mine?
Absolutely. For me, what was interesting was the heckling part. And one of my experiences, for those of you that have followed this podcast journey so far, there's ancestry in Salem. But before I knew on which side, so to speak, my ancestor was on, years ago, a friend of mine and I attended a Reclaiming of the Witches experience in Salem.
I love this story.
By the water. It was really intense and beautiful and powerful. We were around like a huge bonfire by the ocean. And at one point, we were all bound as witches. So we all had basically like duct tape handcuffs on. And obviously by choice. And then thankfully, part of the process was to break free of them eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And what we needed to experience was both being bound and then actually being a heckler.
Oh.
So we had to stand there at one point being bound while people insulted us. And then the roles reversed. We had to do the heckling. And I remember my friend and I couldn't do it. We were caught up in the emotion of what it felt like to be a persecutor and to have been on the other side, that we literally could not do it. And I remember us having a moment of processing that together. And I remember the words that were coming out when I was even thinking about saying something or expressing something felt so poisonous.
Yes.
It's really,
like I feel nausea right now.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you feel the nausea?
In my solar plexus.
Yeah, same area. Mm-hmm.
It's like the nausea of abusive power.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting.
Yeah. And what comes up for me feeling wise when I feel nausea is disgust.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I feel so disgusted that this is something that we can actually do to each other. Can you connect to the emotionality of the nausea for you?
Yeah, there's judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and disgust that this would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the disgust of how it feels on the other body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I was starting to think of, oh, that's where the shame comes in, is when the energy from the perpetrator fuses with the energy of the victim.
Yeah.
Did they explain why you had to be a heckler and a victim?
I think they did at one point, and I don't remember exactly what they said, but I think the general essence of it was akin to the judgment piece of, and what we talked about last time of like how quickly we can jump sides. And how much of the witch trials was a lot of pointing fingers, and all around the world, not just here in Salem.
It's interesting that you say pick sides,
Mm-hmm.
because we talked about duality. And I just want to land on this for a little bit. Is that okay? It's like the side of the aisles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Democrat, Republican, left. There's a division.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it's actually just part of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm wondering, Leah, for you, does it land differently in your body when we see it as a part of the spectrum of the duality, but not
aside?
Which team are you on?
Mm-hmm.
Because the team or the division is actually part of the trauma, the collective trauma of separation.
Yeah, I appreciate you acknowledging that. Yes, it lands differently in my body when I think about things on a spectrum. I think when I think about that moment in particular, there was a very obvious, like, you pick, or you've got to be very strongly one or the other, like in that Salem experience.
Right.
But what I could feel that connects to the spectrum experience in that moment was the sense of, like, we were sitting on the other side, literally, but our bodies were feeling like, this doesn't feel right all the way over here. Right.
Yes.
And I think we were feeling out for those, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes, like where the middle was, or how we can navigate not being so extreme, right? If we think about a spectrum.
Right.
But yeah, of course, I think anytime I think about things landing on a spectrum, for me, it always feels better.
Yes.
I think about that with diagnoses and symptomology. If we're thinking very Western medical, I think about spectrum in terms of sexuality, gender expression. All sorts of things just land so much more solidly for me when I think about a spectrum. Yeah.
So the image that I get when you talk about that, like the spectrum is like this big circle, right? Of where are you, like up, down, this side, but you're finding a place. Everyone's finding their place in the circle versus the sides, it's one side or the other.
Yeah.
When I keep hearing the word sides, it's like there's a winner and a loser. There's a right way and a wrong way.
Yeah.
There's a light way and a dark way versus so for me, I love that we're digesting this together live, is if we can land on the same space, we can remember that we're of the same space. We're just as in nature, there is diversity, right? And understanding how we all fit together on this shared space is part of the alchemy, is part of the healing of the collective trauma of division and supremacy thinking and patriarchy, where one body is better than another, or so that this feels really like a big piece that we're digesting right now together.
I agree. And I appreciate you bringing in the word nature. It's interesting what came up for me as you were describing that is I don't think a lot of people are aware, and to no fault of their own, it's just, it wasn't news to me until recently, that there are lots of plants and animals that actually change sex. Right? Or can procreate. I forget the exact word for that, but they can procreate completely on their own. And I just think that's really interesting because when we think about nature and us being a part of that circle that you just described, it's an example of how amazingly they can live on. Nature just inherently lives on that spectrum.
Yeah.
And can be resourceful. Like some of the reasons that Jack in the Pulpits, I think, change sex every year is because, or several times throughout that plant's lifetime, depends on the resources that are available to them like that year.
Can you say more about this plant? I don't know.
The Jack in the Pulpit?
Yeah.
It's really cool. I will show you at some point because they grow at the Fells.
In the show notes?
I wonder.
Let's do it.
I wonder actually if I can just hold it up and maybe it'll.
Jack in the Pulpit. I also am curious about the history of the name.
Jack. So this is a Jack in the Pulpit. It's a really pretty.
It looks like a calla lily.
Yeah. That's a very pretty botanical art print of them. Let's see how this shows up. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that's the Jack in the Pulpit, and I'm pretty sure they're native here.
So that you're saying they switch sexes depending on the nutrients available?
I think depending on the resources. Yeah, and I don't know what makes up those resources specifically, but that's my understanding. And there are other creatures and living things in nature that do that, right? Even though I know we weren't speaking specifically to gender, it's just an example of how nature shows us that this is just another experience that's on a spectrum, right? Yeah.
I really appreciate this conversation around gender, because part of the alchemy that I do a lot of with my clients is just reconnecting to their body. And that it includes gender and sexuality and all these other things. But it's really about connecting to your body so that you may be authentically you. And so zooming out back to what side are you on, it almost calls to that need, that wiring that we have for a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And so when being raised and domesticated generationally within oppressive systems, there are particular sides that got access to more resources or security than other sides. And so what has been really interesting and helpful for me and my clients is understanding, oh, this personality is actually not who I am.
Yeah.
Like one of the things, I used to be very introverted and socially anxious, which I can still be if I don't know if I'm safe in a certain space. But as I've been doing my healing work, I'm like, oh, I'm actually pretty extroverted in certain situations.
You are.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, you see that?
Oh, yeah. Like even right now, I feel like you're,
But it's like back to the whole like, oh, but authentically in my body, when I feel safe, this is actually my authentic expression. right?
Mhm.
So going back to if something triggers an intense response, when you clear it out from the right part of your ancestry, what happens is your body doesn't have to brace for persecution.
Yeah.
And so when we clear it out and go, oh, that was the context of that time, and that was the context of this time, and this is the context of this time, I hopefully alchemize it into how do I empower myself now?
Mhm.
Because if we're going to the natural expression of any creature is in its highest good,
Mhm.
how do we create the environment in which we can each be the highest expression of our good?
Yeah.
And by good, just authentically who we are supposed to be.
Yeah.
What comes up for you when I say all that?
Was catching the word empower in the solar plexus.
Again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was standing out. And then curious for you, like what that next step of empowerment often looks like.
Mm-hmm. So just even noticing when I'm like, oh, when I take my power, right? So when I embody my boundary and take my power back, I have grief that comes in.
Yeah.
So it's like from that same place in the solar plexus, it's like from my lungs now, this rise of emotion and grief. Like there's welling of tears a little bit. Because what happens is when my physical body experiences what it feels like to be safe, seen, celebrated, and empowered, for me, I naturally feel all the times when I wasn't. And so that's where the grief is.
I wonder if the little bit of buoyancy that you may feel from the empowerment allows that to feel safe to come up and through. How does that land?
That makes total sense because there needs to be resource to process the grief.
Yeah.
And I've done so much clearing that it's like my throat tightens up right now. And so I know when my throat tightens up, it's again just data, right? So I put my hand there and I notice what's the emotion. So it's tightness, that's the sensation. And then the next piece is what's the emotion there? Because what you're doing is you're just trying to learn your body. So the emotion is fear and sadness. Fear of if I express my truth, that I might lose my power.
Yes.
And then it drops back down into the pain of not having had that grounding for as long as it's been.
How are you doing as you're recalling all of this and talking through it?
It's interesting. I have a picture of my family members who can't do this work. And I have so much empathy because it's hard, especially if you're not used to grief and how, because it can feel consuming when I've been clearing my grief, especially when I can tap into the collective grief. Like hundreds of millions of people died from the Cultural Revolution in China. Hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah.
So it can feel completely overwhelming. And so when I think of the resistance that my family of origin has had to talk about this truth that we can digest it together, we can resource each other nervous system capacity wise and digest it together, their sheer refusal just lets me know that they don't have enough resources to tolerate the discomfort of it.
Yeah.
It's not because they don't love me enough, or it's not because they're not strong enough. They just don't have that skill set or the understanding that this feeling is not going to kill you. It's just data and how to clear it.
Yeah. Yeah. And from, I think, a Western trauma therapy perspective, resourcing is number one. Yeah. Yeah. And so even though you and I don't work so much in that way anymore, I think there's still a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
I was just thinking when I first arrived at Leah's office to start this podcast, I was like laughing because I just had finished a group and we were just cracking up while we were clearing like generational trauma from Salem, interestingly enough. And where else did we land? In Latin America and but it doesn't matter where. What happened was we were laughing about something while we were clearing out this very intense thing. The reason why I bring it up is when you create safety to feel these really hard feelings, it can become a joyful experience of like processing this thing that's really heavy and going, oh my God, because the fact of the matter is we're alive right now. Right? When we're stuck in our limbic system and completely bracing against some kind of next trauma or who's going to have more power than me or what are they going to do to me, there's not the capacity to bring in humor, levity, or a different perspective.
Yeah.
That the clearing out actually creates that nervous system capacity for a different experience.
Yeah. I think that's so true.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways that I like to work with clients and myself that I think would be helpful to share here too is sometimes what can be helpful is to do what I like to call the sandwich. And it's like resourcing a little bit, then dipping down, and then bringing yourself back to the resource. So it's like identifying the resource, moving through the intensity of whatever is underneath of that, and then popping yourself back in. Because I think as we go throughout life, especially with the next breaking news story, it's like, how do we resource, dip in and dip back out?
Yes.
Dip in, dip back out. It's like riding those waves.
And then I have the other image of like when we have a safe caregiver in our toddler stage, we go out to the playground, do something, and then if we get dysregulated, we come back to home base. So the resource is the home base, right? Yeah. So if you can, this is my perspective, if I can create safety in this home base, I can take care of anything. Because what happens is I'm self-attached. I reparent my little ones based on whatever I'm needing. And then every time I go out, I come back home to safe mom, safe parent. I regulate and I soothe, and then I resource enough so I can go back and do the next thing and then come back whenever I need to.
I love that. Thinking of a little like electronic charging stand.
I love all these different ones. Yeah.
Or like a it's such an odd analogy, but I was just thinking of a Roomba vacuum that goes off and does this little thing and then it comes back to base to charge. And yeah, there are a lot of fun analogies like that.
Yes. Oh, this Roomba thing is, can I riff off of it?
Yeah.
Other Roomba.
Going out and collecting all the dirt.
That is not theirs. Okay, so this is what I want to land on with this imagery. I'm going to talk to you directly, okay? Part of this ancestral alchemy is reconnecting to your humanity, which for the people who are probably on this call and resonating most have been historically marginalized or denied access to resources. What we have learned in our bodies and our nervous system is the function of cleanup crew. Okay? The function of cleanup crew. So for me, as a Chinese American who was raised in a restaurant, service. What do you want? Oh, I'll make it, right? Just translated to my relationships with friends and romantic partners, right? And so what I want to invite you to hear is, how are you domesticated in your ancestry, right? If you are from a cis female body or however you were indoctrinated or however you were trained, look at it like neutral data and go, this is my tendency is to overgive as a mother or hold back my emotions as a man, and just go, what historically have I been taught and why? And do I want to continue living in that way?
I love the way that you frame that question. Can you say that one more time? The domestic question.
I don't know. This word has been having a big charge. Domesticated. Yeah, totally. Right? We are wild creatures, just like nature, right? And in our wildness is our beauty. And domestication is, how do I keep you in the home doing the thing that I want you to do versus you being free to be who you are? So there's So for me, when I'm thinking of it, it's like there's an attachment to a role or a way of producing rather than a way of being.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Interesting. I think especially for those of us, I'm speaking for myself here, because this is my own lived experience being cis female, for people that have been socialized female, it's like, yeah, the amount of labor. And then it only gets deeper when you add the intersection of race to that.
The amount of labor, what? I just want to make it very
clear. The amount of labor that women have done throughout lifetimes.
Forced to do.
And forced labor.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes violent labor. Yeah. Really striking. And to think about, to bring it to modern day times, how is that showing up in your workplace? How is that showing up in your home? How might you be passing that on to your children?
Just makes me think, like, how is it showing up in my home? I had a very intense moment with my kids last night. And it was like, they were just like watching TV and they didn't want to clean up after. And I was like, can you clean up? And they're like, yeah. And they didn't. And they just kept not doing it. And I had a rage. And they're like, going on, Mom. And I'm like, do you know how many generations of women? And they're like rolling their eyes because they always hear about this. Have had to just clean up everyone's stuff. I just wanted to clean up your fucking dishes. And they're like, okay. Very sorry for this intensity. It's just very exhausting.
It's true though. It is exhausting, right? Yeah.
But this is like a humorous, and yes, I do curse at my kids and they curse at me. For me, the reason why I feel comfortable is because I've had no safety expressing any kind of dissatisfaction. That for me, it felt really important that my kids had safety to do that. And they also know that when I curse or when I'm angry, I'm talking about the behavior, never about the person, never about the character. It's an expression of feeling.
That's how my husband and I are. Yeah. Oh yeah. We cuss all the time.
Not at each other.
But like we'll be arguing and cussing, like a similar dynamic. But it's not degrading. Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think it adds depth actually to our conversation.
I think in particular, the way that you're presenting. Full circle back to what 45 said to Zielinski around, we've heard enough from you. Or you can't, is this sense of decorum or what's an appropriate way of expressing your feelings, right? And it's really about what's your authentic expression and how does it land on the other person that you're communicating with.
Yes.
So it's not a white supremacy, like this is the right way of speaking and you should not be cursing or using that uncouth language, right? It's, if it feels authentic and the charge feels authentic, then you naturally share time and space with people who can handle it or understand how you communicate too. It's back to the whole, it's so backwards how we've been taught to find our community is let's find the community that we want access to, who has access to resources, and how do I pretend so I'm accepted there? Whereas for me, I believe if I am orienting to my authentic expression, figuring out what I like, what I don't like, and what I want and what I don't want, and how I want to be in my body, I will naturally attract and gravitate towards others who are comfortable and will celebrate that.
That's right. Yeah. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I have told clients that are dating, I literally will sit with them and go through their profile. And it's such an interesting experience of navigating where they're recognizing that they're not being authentic. And it's based always in fear of rejection.
Yes.
I often share with them what you just did. Imagine you're weeding out all the people. You're weeding out, if you can be as authentically you as possible in your profile, what you're actually doing is weeding out all of the dates that are not going to hold any weight in your life.
Amen.
And it's amazing to see people be like, oh, wow, I never thought about it that way. I'm actually just naturally weeding people out. And then that gives you literally the energetic space. If we think that about this more on a quantum physics level, literally gives you the energetic space to be calling in what you're worthy of. And that can match that authenticity. Yeah.
But that takes resource security.
It does.
Right.
It's
knowing, of knowing. So then I hold my value. Right. And I know that I'm the one that I've really been waiting for. I'm just looking for someone to hang out with while I'm journeying alongside each other. Right. Yeah. And it's knowing and embodying from our power center. Right. Oh, I've got me.
Yep.
I'm just looking for someone else who enjoys, but I've got me. My security and safety and love is not contingent on being picked by somebody else.
Yeah.
That's again ancestral charge that needs to be cleared out. I love that, Leah.
I would love to. It's really quite fun. And this is the thing is like, back to your humor point. It's so fun to do this with people. Yeah. Because I'll be like, is that really how you feel about yourself? Because this is what I'm hearing and hear every time you come in every week. And what I want to reflect these things back to you that I notice about you, it's really fun.
It goes back to like how I parent with authenticity.
Yeah.
It's like this similar thing of, seriously, this is what you want to call in.
And it's super fun because they know that it's not coming from a judgmental place, right? And that's the piece around like love is always inherently risky, period. And
say more.
It's like, even if you fall in love with the love of your life and have an amazing partnership, tragedy could strike at any time, right? So there are like ways that we can be removed from that partnership. They're completely out of our control, even if we've done the best we can in the relationship, right? So it's just, there's always risk in that. And so for me, it's like, how do we minimize the risk? Similar to like when we thought about the spectrum of duality last time. And can we make that spectrum of harm a little bit smaller? Similar, can we make that spectrum of risk a little bit smaller?
So interesting. Because I experience like the spectrum of risk. So viewing it as risk is like how it lands in my body is like from fear. Versus if I am fully resourced and I understand that I can protect myself and I can take care of, not anti-dependently, but that I'm in control of my sense of safety and belonging. And love. Going through hard times feels way less scary.
Exactly. Yeah, which is minimizing that.
Yes, absolutely. Because I'm not bracing and thinking that everything's gonna fall apart. And needing to control everybody, right? Or get them to do exactly what I want.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just noticing that deep breath you just took.
I know,
right?
It's so much easier to be in the world.
Yeah. And it's good. I think that this is a testament, quite literally, to like the spaciousness that this work can provide in our bodies and our minds and our spirits and our lineages. Yeah.
Just landed on this realization. I remember when I first started needing to put myself out there, like on video or TikTok or whatever, I had such a constricted, anxious experience. Like, what if I say the wrong thing? Or what if I look stupid? Whereas now I'm just sitting here going, we didn't even know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I know.
And it just made me feel like, oh, this is literally the embodied sense of authenticity that we keep talking about, right? And I'm just like in awe of when I'm able to clear out so much ancestral trauma and alchemize it and embody it and integrate it. This sense of ease is literally how I walk in the world now. And I was just sitting here like in awe. So
good. I love that for you.
Me too.
Yeah. It's interesting too, the word authenticity, because I keep wanting to find the direct research project and I have yet to be able to find it, but maybe if I can, we can put it in the show notes. There was a study done on the highest
I heard of this.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So maybe
No,
yeah,
you
okay.
go.
Correct me or interject here if it feels right in any way. There was a study done where people were researching what the highest positive frequency or vibration would be in terms of a feeling, emotion. I just want to pause here and let you guess for a second.
And when she says you, she means you,
Yes.
not me, because I already know the answer.
Yeah. You on the other side of this. And
most people pick like love or peace or happiness.
But that was not it. It was authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love for you to explain why you think that is or what you remember, and then I will explain what I think.
I just remember watching it on TikTok or whatever and just being like, oh my God, this makes so much sense because it's like the fullest, highest expression of who you are. That makes total sense that would be the highest frequency.
Totally.
Because why else are you on this planet?
Yeah. So even if you're cussing, if it's authentic and it's not degrading to myself or you, right? It's actually high vibration. And I posted a quote to my Instagram stories yesterday that talked about anger actually being a vibration too, and you can alchemize it in the sense of like, how do you actually then put that into direct action? Right?
Yeah, 100%. Especially right now, anger needs to be harnessed.
Yeah,
absolutely, to embody our rightful place. Yeah.
And I really appreciated that because I think when we had talked about spiritual bypassing, this anger is often an example of that. Cussing is often an example of that, right? These are low frequency things. You don't want to linger there or even feel anger at all. Yeah.
But that goes back to supremacy thinking, right? One way is better than another versus it's just data and it just informs where you are.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, one of my favorite memories of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, is she'd sometimes go, God damn it. And it was just like the context in which she would say that in, and the moment she would say that in, it was actually so endearing. And it's like a positive memory actually that I have of her because she was never saying it about somebody and it was always done with humor and yeah, so it's actually sometimes I go around and I'll just be like, God damn it. And it brightens my day, actually. It's funny. Yeah.
So as we're coming to a close, the alchemy opportunity here is about authenticity, right? How do we, like, if something intense comes up, how do we just explore it in order to get to our authenticity? And the mantra or maybe orientation that might be helpful is nothing wrong with me, nothing wrong with you. What is this data telling me? What would happen if you knew in your bones and every cell in your body that you are perfect as you are, right? In whatever feeling that you have, and that you are exactly where you're supposed to be, and things are unfolding exactly as they're supposed to, including what's happening externally, right? Okay, so this is data that's happening around me. It's not something that takes my power away. It's just data to inform how I want to show up in my life and in my body. My stomach. Well, yeah. So that's the other thing, right? So you're on the right track when you start to have grumbling in your belly. Yeah. Because it's digesting, it's moving something. It's literally. So again, connecting to the body. Yeah. You are a human being, not a human doing. When you're on the right track, you'll start to feel movement. Yes. Or openness in your chest, or a sigh, or okay. Other common ones are deep breaths. Also yawning, super common for me when my nervous system's starting to drop down in a positive way. And then burping. I just have a burp right now that I'm holding it. Yep. Yep, this happened to me actually on a call with one of my spiritual mentors the other day. I started burping and I was like, oh, there comes some movement. Yep. Up and out. Yeah. And shitting. That too. And actually peeing. I pee a lot after like major energetic movements. Because you're literally clearing out your system. That's right. Thank you for that. Yes, thank you. Point. Yes.
I think I would just like to offer this card at the end. Oop, here we go. I get it in the right place. This is from Kim Kranz's The Wild Unknown Alchemy deck. And Judy and I pulled the healer before we came on. And one of the things that the guidebook speaks to is that we all have a healer within. And I just want to bring us back to that moment of this is the reason we're doing this podcast, right? Great to have a helper, a healer, a guide, a therapist, whatever on the other side of you. And also, we have the ability to do this work internally as well. Yeah.
It's not just the ability, it's the thing.
Yes.
Okay. Like you are the gift. Nothing to heal, nothing to fix. You are here for you. And you are the one that you've been waiting for.
You are already the healer.
Yes. All right. Like, subscribe, comment, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Leah.